Mr Chair, can I just add in terms of Councillor Webster's comments around local board views, because we are seeking local board views, they can, through their local knowledge, highlight where they think there are infrastructure concerns to us directly, and that gives us another matter that we would further then investigate.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Webster. It's a good point, and members, I think this is the point that we've all been canvassing, the likelihood of the infrastructure arriving, and I think Councillor Webster's emphasising that we can't just use that word likely as, you know, remotely likely. There's got to be something in our budgets and transport plans that signal that when the development occurs, that there will be that infrastructure. But I think that's on top of our minds all. I think I should go to Councillor Fletcher and Quacks, because they do have an amendment, and both councillors, and we have all heard the response from David on the already, in David's view, that that's already incorporated. But I take the valid points raised yesterday in our workshop. Councillor Fletcher, you've heard David's response. Do you want to just take us through how you would like to further emphasise it, if at all?
Thank you for that, and I'll also hope that you will give that same opportunity to my colleague, Councillor Quacks. I just want to touch on it briefly, and it's not in any way intended to be disrespectful to the staff and the assumption that that is already a factor. I guess I'm in that belts and braces mode where I want to see it explicitly stated as part of the criteria. There are just so many unknowns for us at the moment, and we've had a brief discussion in and around the transport infrastructure issue, and you know, we are hanging our hats on the transport accord with government, and you know, we are responsible for the oversight on this, and I really, in a governance sense, I feel that keenly. And to that extent, I think it seems to me only logical that we give explicit criteria for that consideration. It doesn't change anything, perhaps, in the officer's mind, but it gives a very clear steer to any of those who are contemplating, developers contemplating special housing areas, that that is something that we wish to see. And the reality is that we don't know at the moment whether we're in a housing bubble or not. You know, we don't know that. The interest rates cut today, the possibility of further cuts. There's just so many unknowns that it would seem logical to me and prudent that where we're looking at this development and we're trying to open up housing areas and housing for Aucklanders, that we are mindful of where those jobs are likely to be. So, you know, I just see it as a belts and braces provision, and in no way disrespectful to officers, and I'll hand over to Councillor Quacks.
Oh, thank you.
Quacks.
Yeah. Look, thank you, and it's been my concern, I guess, for some time that we ensure that the SHAs do have, the people that are moving there do have access to employment. And, you know, that's why I was quite supportive, or in fact, very supportive of the Bremner Road development in South Auckland, because we know that that's an area which has higher employment opportunities. And I just want a little bit, like my council colleague, in terms of being a little bit more specific, because what it says here on page 31 are in close proximity to existing or emerging employment areas. I just want to be a little bit more definitive than that, Mr Chair, and that's why I've asked, or Councillor Fletcher and I have asked for a criteria into the average commute time, because we do know what the average commute time is around Auckland. We were told that by Dr Blakely before he left, so we know approximately what the average commute time is across Auckland to employment, and so that would certainly help us, because there will be a difference. It may take somebody a lot longer to get there by private motor vehicle, for example, than by public transport. So I think that there is an opportunity there to be a little bit more definitive around those employment areas, and and that is going to be a very important consideration. I just don't think that criteria in there are in close proximity to major or existing or emerging employment area is quite definitive enough. I'd like to be a little bit more definitive, and that's why we put up this recommendation for your consideration.
Thank you both members. Councillors, for the other members, I've sort of considered this, and I think we've heard from the staff that this is referred to, but our councillors, Fletcher and Quacks, are asking for a further refinement. I'm supportive of that from the chair, but I'd like to just get a feel from others. Is there a feel that we can support our two councillors in a further refinement in that area? And I'm happy just to incorporate it as one of the points. There might be other points in the discussion. So can we just park that one? And on this particular item, Councillor Cooper, I'll just go to Councillor Brewer first. Oh, sorry, Councillor Anai, then Councillor Brewer, then Councillor Cooper.
Just back to Kay, please.
Okay.
Yeah, I just have concern here. So what happens if a developer still wants to pursue his questioning, which has been blocked off at this?
David, did you hear that question? What happens if a developer wants to pursue and he's blocked off at this point?
Through you, Mr. Chair, blocked off through which point, Councillor Nye?
Sorry, my understanding. You say that it comes to Deputy Chair, and if you've made the decision, it stops right there. And if a developer insists that he wants to pursue this further, where does he go with that statement?
Oh, through Mr. Chair, the criteria here that we're referring to are the mandatory criteria in the housing legislation. So the only time that we're not bringing that to you is when those mandatory criteria are not met, or there is an inappropriate zoning, such as an industrial zone. I personally think that resolution being amended to undertake that activity in consultation with the Chair and the Deputy Chair is an enhancement. I think that helps the staff, and I would agree with and support that addition to the recommendation.
So what you're saying, at that point of time, you've considered everything and that's the final decision?
It's primarily around the criteria that are mandatory that are not satisfied. If they want to pursue it, they can come back with another request with additional information to say that they do satisfy the criteria, and some people do that, some requesters.
So they have that option?
They do.
Thank you.
We already do that to some extent anyway. We do an initial screening, and a lot of requests that come in clearly don't meet a number of criteria, and we tell people straight away, and they generally accept that.
Councillor Brewer?
Thank you. I just wanted to explore the line or the resolution from 16 April by committee, a preference for brownfield SHA opportunities pending completion of a future urban land strategy. So one of the aspects of these recommendations and this endorsed criteria, I presume, is that we're picking up on that 16 April resolution, and we have got a preference for brownfields development over greenfields. So again, following on from what Councillor Webster was saying about legal challenges and judicial reviews and that, so within the HASHA legislation of 2013, we have got that ability to change direction, to put a greater emphasis from greenfields, where we may have been, to brownfields. That's within our rights?
Yes, that's our understanding. So the criteria are a mix of mandatory and discretionary matters. So the mandatory ones are the ones explicitly referenced in the HASH legislation. The others are matters that the council considers to be important, and ultimately it's the council's discretion that leads to a recommendation to the minister.
Yeah. Well, one thing I wanted to test is that the future, where are we? I've lost my way here. The Auckland Housing Accord in 2013 that the Mayor and Minister signed off allowed and noted the future urban zones. And I just wonder whether we're treating, we're saying here, in light of pending completion of the future land strategy, supply strategy, but that was accommodated and foreseen in the 2013 Housing Accord, and it said there the applications in areas that transition from future urban to live urban zonings can be integrated, include a structure plan, zone plan, subdivision, and other related consents. So in the Housing Accord, that future urban stuff was accommodated if they met those certain plans and integrations. And I suppose my concern is that under the future urban development was potentially encouraged back in the Housing Accord on very tight conditions, but potentially now are we kicking it for touch? And again, it just comes back to, as someone who reads the Housing Accord or a greenfields developer that thought they were getting there are now saying, oh no, we're going to focus on brownfields. And I suppose my other comment is brownfields in the legislation has a minimum of 4 dwellings or more to meet the criteria of SHA status, where greenfields has 50 dwellings or more. I see that there is a request to lift the 50 dwellings as a preference, but when we go from greenfields, big developments, to piecemeal, smaller brownfields developments, what is that going to do to our reaching our housing targets, supply targets of 39,000 over 3 years, 17,000 in year 3, if we're focusing inside the MUL and looking at kind of 6 developments here, eight dwellings there. So I suppose the question is, are we on thick ice from greenfields developers that will see that we're now jumping in bed with we're going down the brownfields development, even though the Housing Accord accommodated and promoted applications in greenfields? And also, is the Minister of Housing, given that there is a philosophical divide, as we saw with the Huapai scrap a couple of months ago, is the Minister of Housing, is he anticipating this change of direction, and is he comfortable, and his officials comfortable, that we're now racing around inside the city limits, building 4 dwellings here, 10 dwellings here, and as a preference, and not so much doing the big 50 dwelling plus developments that will help them reach their much needed housing targets. So that's kind of where my concerns are.
Range of questions there,
yeah.
David.
So firstly, on the 4 versus 50, that relates to qualifying developments within SHA. So I think that really just signals that we expect within a brownfield area that the actual applications coming forward might be significantly smaller than you'd expect in a greenfield situation, and that tends to be played out in the process that we're seeing in existing SHAs. The preference for 50 or more was partly in response to this committee and the council in general not wanting to take up a lot of time and effort creating SHAs for very, very small developments. So again, it's only a preference, but it doesn't mean we can't ignore smaller developments, but we're basically saying we will look more favourably on SHA requests in brownfield areas that are small if they have some particular feature, like they're particularly affordable or some kind of exemplary design or something. Regarding the future urban land supply strategy, the Minister and MB are well aware of our current preference for brownfield over new greenfield, but again, it's a preference. We communicated it to all everyone on our database, including the existing greenfield requesters, who are essentially waiting for the council to complete the future urban land supply strategy, and we're waiting for that as well. It's in progress, and we can use that to inform our further due diligence on those requests that are sitting there waiting. But in the background to that, we've already established 97 SHAs, and 2/3 of the potential yield from those are actually in future urban zone land. So we've already made use of that direction in the Housing Accord to enable future urban zone land, but it's only in those areas where we're satisfied that we can achieve the infrastructure requirements. One of the reasons why we have wanted to just put on hold those Greenfield SHA requests until the future urban land supply strategy is in place is that's going to respond to future infrastructure commitments and directions, so we can actually use that information to determine which of those requests are supportable and which ones are not.
So just recapping there, Mr. Chair, so housing supply targets, this will not have a negative effect on going more brownfields than greenfields, will not have a negative effect on reaching the anticipated and well publicised targets. You're confident that?
No, it won't affect our ability to reach those targets. For two reasons. One, the Housing Accord targets 39,000 sites and dwellings over 3 years. Any additional greenfield SHAs at this time won't have any impact on that. They'll be important for ongoing housing supply, but they won't register in the remaining year of the Housing Accord. The other target we're also mindful of is the Auckland Plan target for an average of 7 years ready-to-go land. And we believe the SHAs have already been established will help us reach that target, but what happens beyond that really is not so much a matter for SHAs, but it's the ongoing process, probably under the adopted unitary plan and the future urban land supply strategy, will allow us to continue to meet that 7-year average target. And
you're confident that when this refined and consolidated SHA criteria is communicated to interested parties and put on the council website, that we're not going to get a backlash from the greenfields, future urban developers that were thinking they were getting towards the top of the pile and realise that they've been nudged back for a while? Are you confident that that can be managed?
Well, we're already managing it. They're already aware of the process we're going through. I imagine most of them have submitted on the future urban land supply strategy, and so the strategy team will be aware of their views. We're on ongoing dialogue with a number of them, wanting to know, when we're in a position to have another look at their request, but some of them are probably not very happy, others are accepting of that. I think it's just an ongoing discussion, and we haven't sort of said we don't want to talk to you. We've just said that we're waiting for an important piece of work to come through, and it's coming, and when we've got that we can use it to re-engage with them.
And there won't be a missile coming out of the Minister of Housing's press office
we can't guarantee that.
Yeah.